welcome to episode 212 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 16th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. I'd like to extend a very special welcome this week to listeners Andrea in Illinois, Laura in Michigan, Michelle in New Hampshire, Corinne in Iowa, and Angela in Virginia. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook, on Twitter, my handle is at LMS_United, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now a word from our official sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning PebbleGo research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I am so excited to be working with them. And now in a segment I like to call Why I Love Capstone. Friends, this week I want to talk a little bit about a series that I think is really going to be a fantastic addition to your school collection, and that is Social Justice and You. And friends, I do have a dedicated link in the show notes. This is by Maribel Valdez Gonzalez. There are 4 books in the series, and I'll read this from the copy. What does it take to live in a multicultural world that's always changing? We must know ourselves, respect others, build healthy communities with one another. Drawing from Learning for Justice's social justice standards, this series will help kids explore the identities they hold, engage with people who hold different identities, and recognize to take action against injustice. With examples and engaging text, this important series gives readers the tools they need to help build inclusive communities. Friends, the reading level is directed towards grades 3 through 4 with an interest level of 3 through 5. These books average 32 pages and they are informational text. And friends, the titles in this series include Be a Change Maker, Be Your True Self, Build Strong Communities, and Choose Justice. And I think it goes without saying that these titles would inspire a great deal of conversation. And what would really be fun is to see how different classes and grade levels come up with different actionable items, things that students can do to empower themselves to be those change agents in their communities. So I would love to see how this series of books would be enjoyed by different age groups. And again, to see what kinds of solutions they come up with, because I think kids are really clever. And this would be an opportunity to see what they would do with the kind of information that we're providing in these age-appropriate books. Friends, I am so grateful to Capstone for their continued commitment to support the podcast in Season 5. They are offering listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for our episode, Retired Librarians Rock, and my conversation with Teri Belcher. Teri Belcher, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Friends, we are in for a treat. You know, Teri Belcher, we usually start this conversation by asking you to describe where in the country you work, tell us about your current library and the grades that you support, and what your schedule is like. However, in this case, you are retired. Can you give us an idea of your career as a school librarian for some context?
actually started before being in a school library. I was in a public library. And when I couldn't get a teaching job, which I was trained for phys ed, I decided I was going to go back and get my master's degree. And I became a school librarian. I was working at Howell Carnegie Public Library at that point. And when I was done with my degree, and I got a double master's so that I knew I could go anywhere, public or school, Howell hired me at their middle school. So that was fabulous. And then I moved through the high school, but as was happening during that day and age, there were cuts. And normally the cuts came with phys ed, library, and the arts. And so with not being tenured, I was cut every year. And I finally got a full-time position in Hazlitt and was there for about 7 years and redesigned the library. It was like an old movie theater with golden ropes, and the kids couldn't get back to the books. And we opened it up and made it more inviting. But after the 7th year, again, person at the middle school retired, and because the two schools were connected by a parking lot, they wanted me just to walk over and help. I was teaching almost every single hour at the high school. So there wasn't really a time when I could go over there, and I knew they needed to be taught. It was a little stressful, and I finally said no. So I moved on to Pinckney, where I was at for 12 years. And at the high school, I didn't have my fingers in the design for the new building, but I made the new design work for me. I had 2 labs for computers, and I had room for 3 classes besides those 2 labs. And there were many days when they were filled. And taught them at that time, this is going to age me, Filamentality was a research tool that I fell in love with, had been trained on, and I worked with my teachers to help the students because it's actually a way to design research and to understand how to start those questions that you're going to need to answer. Funny side note, I just lost a very dear friend that I taught with at that school, and in her basement, her children are finding all of the Filamentality forms. So she never got rid of anything. But anyway, we continued there. It was a beautiful library. And at the time that I was at Pinckney, I was involved with technology. I was involved with writing the curriculum. But on the other side of the fence, I had a very dear friend who was one of the tech leaders. They had a co-director. So at the time that I became president of MAME, now Maisel, he became president of McCall. That's the only time in the history of Michigan that both presidents of those 2 agencies have been from one school district. So we were excited. We held hands a lot. We fed off each other. We worked on curriculum. And when it got to the point that I felt like they were starting to back off my support, they weren't going to give me any funding the next year. They actually talked about putting me back in the classroom. And for me at that time, back in the classroom meant phys ed because that's what I used to teach. So I said, no. And I figured 5 or 6 years to go. And I went to a school district, Charlotte. And at the time, I think 3 years before that, Charlotte had won the MAME School District Award, the MAME School Board Award. The person that I was replacing because she was going out because of cancer, she had won the School Librarian of the Year award. And so I was walking into a dream job, and I loved it until we got a new principal in our building, at which time my library had been designed as an instructional center. I had room for 4 classes in the main floor. I had a side classroom, and I had 2 additional computer labs. And there were times when I had classes in all those areas and was just running back and forth. And this principal came in and decided that books weren't really necessary anymore, and that where they had been doing presentations and having speakers come in was the cafetorium, and he wanted to start using the library for that. And again, the talk was putting me back in phys ed, and I said, you know what? I've done all I can do. That school I had developed into a big six school, if anybody's familiar with that. We had the certificate and everything. And the curriculum director said, well, what are we going to do about the big six stuff when you leave? She said, well, I guess the teachers probably can handle that on their own. And they all looked at me and they went, no. So I retired at that point. And another very dear friend of mine in MAME, Annette Haley, kind of was getting the shovel out the door as well. And we decided that we still had way too much energy and too much to offer. We were not going to go quietly into the night. And so we developed a proposal to MAME, and we spoke about the need for support. There are many media specialists out there that didn't have aides. We could go into those schools, and as long as we were directed by a certified school librarian, we would walk in there and we would do whatever project they wanted, most of which included weeding. We have moved libraries, we have boxed libraries, we have barcoded. We actually, for Lisa Brakel down in Airport Schools, we cataloged 3 separate book rooms for their reading instructors. So that was the birth of our organization, MAME4Ever, and we needed to continue to give back to the organization that had given us so much.
Well, and friends, you know, I'm glad you mentioned Lisa Brakel, because she was on the show a while ago, an episode called District Librarian, and she mentioned that MAME4Ever had come in because when you're overseeing a district, all of a sudden that workload, and you really, I think the wonderful thing is you when I think about MAME4Ever, my first, image is sort of the fire brigade or the volunteer firefighters going in there, and they know what to do, and they're going to just boots on the ground. And all of a sudden you have this amazing group of motivated librarians who know exactly what needs to happen. You're like the best people to show up and help Michigan librarians who need that extra source of support. Teri, I can't help because, friends, behind Teri are all of her MAME recognitions, these wonderful plaques that, you sort of flew through this career of being a school librarian in Michigan. I completely understand how incredibly sort of, I don't want to say volatile it is, but there is a lot of fluctuation when it comes to the changing of administrators and school funding. And it's that sort of, I got to say, it was a little unnerving as a librarian coming into this profession. When I started in 2007, I was very aware that I could never for 1 minute assume my job was secure. And you mentioned Annette Haley. She was one of my instructors at Wayne State. I know she was. I loved working with her, and I was so excited. And I think we sort of get these degrees in spite of what the current climate was at the time. And, flash forward now, we're into year 16 beyond when I graduated from Wayne State University. But first of all, back up, you have been incredibly involved at our state organization when you were working in the libraries day in and day out. And all of those plaques behind you remind me, at least, of how often you've been recognized for your leadership. Could you just sort of walk us through the things that you did while you were working in libraries to keep our state organization going?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because I was just talking to Sue Schwartz, who's with REMC. And Sue is the first one who, now I will not say dragged me kicking and screaming, but brought me into MAME. She was in my region at the time, which was Region 13, Ingham County area. And Sue was the region rep. And when somebody else conned her into running for president, Sue said, well, Teri, why don't you take over the region? And I love that because I love getting people together. I loved the conversations. And it's interesting, there are still some Region 13 people from the old days who meet on a regular basis at Schuler's bookstore once a month. I've gone in and met with them a couple of times. I cannot get them to join me in MAME4Ever, but there are some of the new people that are starting to get active again in Region 13. So that's a fun thing to see. From that point on, when Sue was elected, I was on her conference committee because, of course, I was incapable of saying no to Sue. On her conference committee, I did everything imaginable. I was secretary one year. I worked in special events one year. We actually made cotton candy at the gala, which we used to call it. The gala was a party on a Wednesday night. Thursday night, we honored our past presidents and our award winners. And Friday, we got to go home and sleep. But I held various roles on the conference committee, and I attended many meetings. I went to the school board committee at the state level because I had a good friend who was on that, and she said, why don't you come and talk to us? And so I went to explain to them the value of school libraries. I became a tech co-chair of a committee in another school district, not the one I was teaching in, which we very often know happens. Somebody else recognizes you as opposed to your own district. But going to the Library of Michigan meetings, going to the Michigan Library Association meetings, led me into being comfortable being president. I did my own conference, and luckily all those people that owed me a favor were on my committee and did a wonderful job. I have no clue. I don't remember that conference because you are so busy running around. But I remember the school district that I was co-chair of the technology. They sent their entire tech team to my conference. And I was blown away by that. And they were in the front row when I did the welcoming, and I recognized them. It was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to see where the growth was. And then once your conference is done, then you roll right into being president the next year. And so I'm attending all the meetings. I'm attending all of the national conferences. I went to AECT. I went to ALA, I think 3 times. It took me all over the country, and in fact to Canada, because AECT was in Montreal that year. So I got to travel places I never would have before. And as we were developing this, I began working with a professor at Eastern Michigan, George, and for the life of me, I'll forget his last name now. He ran the Department of Ed was a professor in the Department of Ed at Eastern Michigan, and he wanted to run a week-long class up in Petoskey. And I said, awesome. I'll do filamentality. We'll bring in Big Six. We can use our people as presenters. So the cost is not going to be prohibitive. And they got Eastern Michigan credit. Now, I ended up, because of the work that I did too, got credit as well. And over the time, I had enough credits to bump me up 3 pay steps at my school because of the work with that. But the classes were phenomenal. The friendships, we stayed in a dorm. We had a pub crawl. I walked every morning. I got up at 5 o'clock and I said, okay, everybody's joining me. If you can go to the pub crawl, you can come walk with me. And we took over that college campus in Petoskey and just had a fabulous time. We did that, I believe, 5 years in a row.
Wow.
At the end of it was a very bad time in my personal life. My husband left me, and he left me 2 days before I had to go up and run this class. So I was a little out of it, and because of my friendships there, because of my being on task, I got through that, and I've always said, I can never give back enough.
You know, it sounds to me like your leadership style is one where you've seen the opportunities to build those bridges and can make those connections with school librarians and other facets of academics and with the state leadership of librarians in Michigan Library, you know, and I see that as a talent. I don't think many people, you have to have vision, right? You have to have vision to put all of those pieces together and to see something that wasn't there before, because you can pull on all of those talents. You know, I'd love to get an appreciation for what your life has been like now as a retired school librarian, because I don't think you've slowed down at all. How long have you been retired?
Since 2008. So, 15 years.
Yeah. So 15 years. You know, friends, to sort of tie some connections here, at the end of 2022, I recorded episode 205, Supporting Rural Librarians, and my conversation with Heather Perkinson. And I was embarrassed when I realized how little I understood or appreciated just how vital our retired librarians are to our state organization, our annual conference, and so much of what happens behind the scenes here in the state of Michigan. So I'm excited to have Teri here to give us an idea about some of the history of this organization, which I believe can be replicated in states all around this country and around the world. Teri, I'm so excited you're here because I'm hoping you can give listeners a better understanding of how the retired school librarians of MAME4Ever sort of became sort of formalized as a part of our state organization. At the time, it was called MAME. It's called MASL now. But MAME4Ever, I think you've been there from the beginning, right?
I have. I'm one of the co-chairs for developing this group. We did a proposal to MAME. One of the things that there was a lot of concern about is that we would step in an area where a school should hire a professional and chose not to. And I have been contacted by several superintendents and principals asking us to come in, open a school, close a school for the end of the school year or the beginning. And I tell them no. Our entire proposal was that we would be able to give back to our peers who are in the field and who are drowning because they don't have the support that they need. And we would be professional support. However, we required them to tell us and give us the directions. So if they say to us, we want you to weed our collection, we have several questions for them, and we tell them the tool that we would like to use and see if they agree to that. And then they tell us the circulation that they want to keep and what they don't. For example, the school that we just finished wanted to keep back 10 years, anything that had circled or circulated, which is their call. We don't have a judgment on that. But what has to happen is if that person's not around, just like when we talked about Lisa Brakel being a district person, she still gave us the directions that she wanted for every library. And we just went about our business and did it. So we started this with that idea to be support because we still had a lot of high energy. Plus, the biggest fact is we're all social idiots and we love to spend time with each other. I mean, that's why our conference is such a draw, because we just want to go see our friends again. And so when Annette and I started this, we started it because we wanted to continue to spend time together professionally as well as socially. So when MAME agreed to make us a SIG, a special interest group, we then put a note out to everybody in MAME and we said, this is what we're available to do. And we never gave any kind of a limit. Our biggest thing that we tell them, you are required to provide us drinking water and a lunch. And we don't care what it is.
We'll work for food. Yeah, we'll work for
exactly.
food.
That was us.
Just clarify, because you sort of went through this, but appreciate that in no way does MAME4Ever replace the need for a certified school librarian in that space. You are working in conjunction with the person who is there. And I think that's vitally important to emphasize, because we are not seen as a way to replace having a school librarian. It's kind of like, when you're a librarian, there are times when you need a great deal more extra help, whether you have just received a grant, you are going to be anticipating a consolidation, or you're going to be moving. And I love this idea of calling upon the very group of people who would understand exactly what needs to happen. And you come in for that very specific need, and you'll work for food.
Yes. And that's exactly, some of your examples are exactly like, we just closed an elementary building in Lansing. It's being torn down as we speak. And we went in and helped them close that library, box things up, weed through things, and determine what they were keeping and what they weren't, and moved it to another building. We will be called when the other building is ready to open those boxes back up and get them in. And we will do some work in their computer. But the reality of it is, we don't do that to replace someone. And in fact, because in that district, we've worked so closely with the diversity admin, she has gone around and they have been able to hire 2 more professional media specialists because of our conversations while we're there, what we're looking at. And most of the buildings that we're in are manned by library aides. And as we go through, I point out things to her that this is what you wouldn't see if you had a professional in this building. So we do our own lobbying.
So, Teri, I love that while you're there, you have an opportunity to be yet another sort of advocate for the reason why we have certified school librarians in all of our spaces. And because I'll tell you what, as somebody who has watched movers come in and box up a collection, it's very difficult to watch. And these are movers. They do, whether it's groceries or whether it's, toys in somebody's house. These are commercial movers. They're simply packing up things. There is very little regard for what it is or how it's going into the box. And the idea that you might have somebody there who can also be part of this process, who has this appreciation for our space and the purpose and how important in many cases, our print collection is. I think it's wonderful. When it comes to MAME4Ever belonging, and you mentioned our conference, you actually do pay dues to the state organization, but when you realize it's sort of a one-time deal, explain for listeners who might like to create a group like MAME4Ever in their state, what is the sort of registration / sort of, membership fees that you have found works best with your organization?
Well, To join our organization, twofold. First of all of our past presidents are automatically members of MAME4Ever. That's a given. If anyone else who retires wants to join, it's $150 one-time shot, and that makes you a lifetime member. What that membership gets you is you have access to come into the conference anytime that you want. You can come all 3 days, all 4 days. You have to work 2 hours a day at something. And who wouldn't want to work at your own conference, right? You get to go in and meet your friends. So that's part of it. And that money goes directly back to our organization, because we also were finding as people retired, as membership dwindled, the coffers were getting a little bit thin. So that money goes directly to MAME as a membership fee. So the other pieces of it then become what that 2 hours looks like a day. And I can tell you right now that most of my key team works probably 45 hours a day at the conference. Seriously.
I don't doubt. I've seen it. And as somebody who's not working on the conference and moving back and forth to sessions, friends, there's this like war room. It's this room where all the things happen. And I look in there and everybody in there is busy. And I'm like, oh, I'm just going to keep on going. But I'm going to my sessions. I'm going to maybe record somebody. And I did some presenting. But what I don't do is a lot of the details, sort of the devil in the details of having a conference run smoothly. You know, in many ways, MAME4Ever is the reason why members like me can focus on the networking and the presenting and the attending and doing all of that I've been going to these conferences to do. And you're sort of I want to say behind the scenes, and have everything that happens in large part because MAME4Ever is sort of working behind the scenes to make sure that everything moves and flows smoothly.
And that's exactly what our third thing was when we submitted the proposal. We wanted to make sure that people that attended the conference and schools who paid for them to attend could actually attend. That if they were on the conference committee, their work was done beforehand or it was carried on as we were there. But some of the pieces of that means that right now, I think we have about 85 members in MAME4Ever, and that fluctuates daily. And we should be getting a few more. We're hoping as these retirees step out that we can get some new blood in. But one of the things that happens is when a person retires, anything that they have library related, and that's really stretching it, can be brought in and put in a garage sale ran by MAME4Ever. Now, that gives people who are just coming into the field a place, and I know this is going to sound really archaic, but maybe you can buy a bookend, or maybe you can buy a poster that would look cool in your library. So it's all of those kinds of things. And the charge is simply, you tell us what you want to pay. So with that money, we then provide scholarships to people who want to come, their school district's not paying, or maybe they are, but they just are still tight with funds. We provide, last year we did 6 $200 scholarships. This year we will do 6 $200 scholarships. And that any of that money from the garage sale goes directly back. We also, because even though we love the library world, we're a creative lot. And so the retirees who, some of the things just blow my mind. They make birdhouses. They do artwork. They do paintings. We have one lady on our team who is a photographer, and she just never ceases to amaze us with her breathtaking views of the Mackinac Bridge. So all of those things come in, and they're on display, and people can buy tickets so that at the end of our awards ceremony, they can select one of those items if their ticket's called. And we even include in there, we have quilts. Cindy Phillips has made us a quilt every year. Luckily, I won one year. Oh my gosh. We've got sewers, we've got painters, we've got one lady who says, I don't do any of that stuff, but I make a mean fudge.
There you go.
Have at it.
Well, and friends, I'll say when I go to a conference, when you go in and meet with the vendors, there's as many people going over to the MAME4Ever display as there are going over to the vendors, because it's a little of everything. And there are so many, it's a sort of combination crafts and all these beautiful things that have been made by our retirees. And then also knowing that all of that's going into scholarship for our members to attend. And again, I had a sense this is what was happening. I had no idea about the scholarships, and really, I think that's amazing. I mean, I am very aware that as a retired librarian, you are supporting our organization on a near daily basis because of the focus. When you have your energy is always being channeled to support the school libraries and the librarians who are still, working in our schools day in and day out.
That's where our passion is. And everybody in our group has the same passion. And they really, there's three of us that kind of team it together, Lorraine Klink, Liz Lewis, and myself. And when I need a decision made, I go to them. Peg Sanford is a retired past president. And Peg has helped out tremendously. Marsha Lambert's a past president. There just aren't enough names, and most of these people have contributed in multiple ways to come in. With our MAME4Ever people, we also introduce the speakers. We provide directions. We man the headquarters, which, as you call, the war room. We set up equipment. We take down equipment and bless their souls. Liz and Lorraine, when my car is overfilled, they load their car because I haul all of the equipment, all of the materials from headquarters, everything. As executive secretary, I have to get there as well. It becomes a huge family deal.
I was well aware that when it came to paying our membership dues, our registration fees to attend the conference, but also things like the goodie bags and the swag, all of those things were being orchestrated by MAME4Ever.
Well, not all the time, but we have started doing the swag bags because people can't get out of their districts. And if you don't have those bags ready the first day of the conference, if you aren't able to leave until the day of, those are things that need to be ready to go. So yes, MAME steps up and does those without any question whatsoever, because again, we have the privilege of being able to be there and being able to see our friends, and we work together really well. We just are like a well-oiled machine.
Am I right that when you're at the conference, there are opportunities for MAME4Ever to have their social gatherings? I know there's a luncheon for past presidents, but it's also your opportunity to renew those friendships and come together. But it is also as much a conference to celebrate our retired school librarians as well as the ones who are still in our libraries today.
Yes. We originally started when Annette and I were co-chairs. Annette is our party girl. And so we would always have what they call our SIG meetings, or those types of meetings were always on Friday, and every different SIG got together, and so we did too. However, after Annette left, I kind of found myself wallowing in things, and I couldn't get out to have a full luncheon. So we decided, because past presidents are part of our organization, we would have the past presidents luncheon, and then MAME4Ever would come in at the tail end of that, and we would do our meeting and tell them what MAME4Ever had been doing, the money we'd raised, how many scholarships we had done, and all of those things, so that we could reconnect.
And again, reminding the members I dare I say, active members versus our retired members, how vitally important and the role that you play in our state organization.
We try to do that at the awards ceremony because, again, they put a microphone in front of me, and so I'm up there talking most of the time. But I always introduce the team that has helped pull together the silent auction, the drawings, and recognize anybody who ends up showing up. A lot of times, some of them are just too tired from the daily work. But we get together at the Librarians After Dark, and we talk about, that's when some of the ideas come up of, oh, you would do that in my school? Sure, send me an email. I'm ready for you. So sometimes, those are the hidden conversations, but we've done a couple of roundtables on MAME4Ever. It may be time to do more because we're getting some newer members in again, but we talk to them about what we're willing to come in and do. And we have a group on the west side and we have a group down in the southeast corner. And we don't really have any certified librarians up north at this point, but we have a group of retirees up there that are ready to run in and take over if they need help.
So can I ask, do you have what is your title in MAME4Ever?
Mine? I'm chair of MAME4Ever.
So you would be fielding those requests. And so you sort of have an opportunity to do something of a sort of an interview with the librarian who's reaching out to you and asking for support. Wow. Yeah, that's wonderful.
An example of how really bizarre this gets. My friend that passed away, who was a very big supporter of libraries, I was at her house 2 weeks before she passed away and was talking to her daughter, who is also a school teacher. And we were talking about a mutual friend who is now just got the job in their area, and she is a certified school librarian. And so when we got done talking, I sent her an email and I said, by the way, I've got a place to stay now if you need our help down here. So, and she got back to me right away and she said, I will need your help. I'm just learning the landscape right now, but once I'm familiar with it, I'll be calling on you to come in. So it's just out of the blue that things happen.
Well, and friends, we talk about how important it is to have that PLN, that professional learning network. And it didn't occur to me how important that networking continues to be even when you're retired.
It's probably more important. When you're in the field, you some days you feel invincible and some days you don't. But for the most part, you know how isolated you are. And that's what drives you to keep going and to get to those conferences and things. When you're retired, you suddenly lose your value. And this has been a wonderful way for all of the retirees to realize they've still got it and they still have something to offer. And when they sit down with the younger people, one of the things that we've had a lot of conversation about lately has been the dynamic shelving. And that's something that's not new or that's not common for us. And we're still leaning towards Dewey. And then I look at it and I say, but look at, because their circulation records are going through the roof. And I said, so we are still learning as well. And it keeps us up on the field, but it also gives us back our value, which I think anytime you're a teacher and you're surrounded by that community of love and support and you walk out of it, it makes it very difficult.
But you're a lifelong learner. And I think that's so affirming, because most guests who come on the show say, oh, well, I'm a lifelong learner. I'm talking to people who go to library. They work in a library every day. You're a retired librarian, and this is still an opportunity to invest in your professional community, but you're also investing in yourself.
Yes. I need to keep up on it. And One of my biggest reasons for keeping up on it too is my grandson. I have a grandson that from the time he was in preschool, I took books to his preschool and read to them and gave them the books, and we talked about the characters in the books. So I never got to do that because I was a high school librarian and we didn't have story time. We did research. So I'm doing that other end of it now and having a great deal of fun and sharing books with my grandson. And then I come back and I meet with these ladies and we talk about books. We're still talking about books and sharing them. And I immediately make my list to go buy for the next round. So it is, I don't feel any older than the day I walked out of the building when I retired.
I know there are a lot of people who retire and look for things to fill their days and activities that keep them mentally sharp. But you've managed to keep your foot in the ring. You still want to be in the library setting. You're still using those skills every time you walk into a library. And this is a way for you to give back to the community. And yet you can also enjoy some of that flexibility that comes with being retired. Wow, all the perks, all the benefits.
I haven't learned to say no, but I do know that I have the option to say no, and that is so empowering. When my friend from the Lansing School District calls and says, in fact, I got an email a couple weeks ago, and she said, I'm going to need a group in March. We're going to be weeding this building. Now, we have already weeded the nonfiction in this 2 years ago. She said, now we need to weed the fiction, and we're going to be adjusting and moving shelves. And I said, okay, I'll get you the numbers as soon as I can get a hold of everybody. So I know that when my people respond to me, they will say, I will give you 2 days this week, 1 day this week, 1 day this week. And I look and I pick and choose and I take those days as my days because I never tell anybody the days that I'm available to come in. And I go with the days that I can get the biggest team there.
You're direct. You're directing all of the you sort of three-ring circus, and you've got to make sure that you've got everybody where they need to be. Absolutely, and many of us feel that way on a daily basis. What advice would you give to retired librarians who would like to stay active? And I'm talking about, say, not just in the Michigan, but also around the country. And I'm especially thinking about retired librarians who move someplace else. Because Heather and I, when we were talking in that episode, she said there were a lot of people who retire, in this case to Maine, who were not school librarians in Maine, but they retired. They're living in Maine as retired school librarians. What advice would you give to somebody in that circumstance, retiring to a state where they didn't work?
My first directive would be for them to find the state association for school librarians. That's first and foremost, because they may have a place for you, and they may, just like with MAME, we know we have this group. I don't think there are any other ones like us out there. I know the academic librarians in Michigan contacted me to try to set something up, but I don't think they ever got followed through with it. But if you go to your state organization, they will have the idea in place, and then they'll start thinking on that. Maybe you step up and say, I've only been retired for 2 years. Do you need help on the conference committee? Do you need help with a speaker coming in? Are there libraries that could use some assistance? And that's when it starts snowballing. We just have a fabulous networking system in Michigan that all just kind of happened on its own. But in other states, you have those organizations. I don't know of a state out there that doesn't have a school librarian organization. Now, some of them are combined with a public library, and there's nothing wrong with that. Or you can contact your local school district, and maybe there's a teacher that needs somebody to come in and read stories for 15 minutes a day, just to help get the kids a different voice to listen to. It keeps their attention. And I know one of our members works with a teacher at her local school district who has students are struggling to read. And so she takes them out of the classroom and they read to her. So you reach out, because if you're waiting for somebody to come to you, it's not going to happen. You've got to be proactive. Go get them.
I love this idea of working in conjunction with the state library organizations, because we want to be a partner in this process. In no way do we ever want to look like we're replacing those who are gainfully employed in the positions that we have. And I do love the idea of working with especially our readers who need to read aloud and those, that one-on-one, because I know in when I worked in the elementary school, it was not unusual to have, and we had a sort of a grandparents who would all come in and listen to the students as they read, to work on their fluency and to work on their word recognition. And something that was a one-on-one. They couldn't be in the classrooms, but they sure as heck could be sitting there with the little kids and they'd be doing their reading. But also obviously wanting to get into those libraries and support the librarians who just have more than they could possibly do in any given day.
Yes. And the biggest key that I agree 100% with what you're saying is being very careful, starting with an agency, because if you just go into a school and say, into the library and say, I'd like to come in and help, you don't know the situation in that school. You don't know if that person is certified. You don't know whose toes you're stepping on, and you don't know the legalities because you're in a new state. So some of those things need to be addressed, but if you went through the state school librarians, you'd get a better feel. There are also literacy groups out there, nonprofit literacy groups that may, if you can't get involved directly with school libraries, that may give you a place to at least just go in and read, listen to a student read or whatever. But there's way too much need for people just to sit back and retire. I mean, I love Michigan, so it doesn't bother me that we had 6 inches of snow yesterday. I'm happy. I got out and drove this morning. It's no big deal. I don't need to go to Arizona. I don't need to go to Florida for sunshine, but I will go wherever I need to be to read a book and to engage a student with that book.
Teri Belcher, you are incredible. I am so grateful that you were able to share with us how the retired school librarians in this state are giving back, doing so in a way that is so channeled and it's directed in a way that the students are going to benefit, the teachers are going to benefit, and more importantly, our school librarians who are going in and working every single day feel that support from MAME4Ever. Would you give us an idea of how, if a listener wanted to reach out to you and had follow-up questions, you are so comfortable in connecting people with the information and the support they need. How might we get in touch with you?
Okay, MAME4Ever does have a Facebook page. I know we're a little archaic, but there are pictures on there of some of the things that we have done, as well as people, and when we're in a school, we like to have pictures taken of us doing the work. And that's just MAME4Ever, and that's MAME, the number 4, EVER. I am more than willing, if there's people that are trying to start a group like this, in sharing our initial proposal that we gave to our state agency. And my email is tbelcher, BELCHER, at MIMASL.org. Now, you may wonder why it's that for an email address. MASL is our new state organization name. We have transitioned from media and education to school librarians, finally, and it makes it a lot clearer when we're talking to people. So we have not decided as MAME4Ever what we are going to do with that, but that's still in the process. for right now, we're going to stay as MAME4Ever until we make a decision. But I am more than willing to share anything that we've got, ideas, places that we've worked. If you want to talk to people and get the other side's view. Like I said, Lisa Brakel, we worked for 3 straight years with her, and she would be able to give you some information as well about how we functioned within her school district and how she worked with the administration to get us in there.
Teri Belcher, I wish you a wonderful rest of the winter. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise today. And thank you again for all you do for Michigan and school librarians every day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
I am so grateful to Teri Belcher and all the retired school librarians who continue to support the efforts of the school librarians here in the state of Michigan. And I knew what we had was special, and I knew what we had is something that would hopefully be replicated and continued in other states, because when librarians retire, we are still incredibly capable of being important contributors to all the wonderful things that happen in our area. And that includes in advocacy and keeping all of our active school librarians feeling the support that we so vitally deserve. And retired librarians are just an amazing source of that energy and inspiration. So I'm so grateful to Teri and to all the retired school librarians who continue to support the amazing efforts of all of the librarians here in the state of Michigan. And I hope, friends, that this is something that you can perhaps try and use in your space as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. One last friendly reminder, friends, I encourage you to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more using the code UNITED. The topic of our next episode will be Making All the Mistakes and my conversation with Jennifer Long. I hope you will tune in.